Oh, there we go.
Well, hello, and welcome in to to this Saturday's MBE podcast. Still not got a name for this podcast, Stephen. So we're just going with MBE podcast at this point. But unless you can think of something, I'm laughing, Stephen, because you said, "Oh, there we go," just as I was about to speak. Stephen, this week we're going to discuss director's cuts and the sort of fascination with it, the rationale behind director's cuts, be it industry, be it fandom, be it the actual director themselves. Why do they happen? Are they a good thing? Are they a bad thing? And obviously, Stephen, when you think of director's cuts, for me anyway, I think of two people. I think of Ridley Scott and I think of Zack Snyder. And that's precisely why I put those two guys' faces on the fucking thumbnail and I split them down the middle. So it's like a Harvey Dent Two-Face situation.
Yep.
But Stephen, obviously it's going to be fluid. We've not really got a script or anything we're working off of here. We've got kind of bullet points we're going to kind of touch upon loosely. The conversation. Obviously the rise of director's cut, Stephen, it's been something that's been going on for a long time. I mean, I've went on a voyage of discovery with this over the last couple of days, looking into it. I wasn't even aware Superman 2 had a director's cut.
Yeah.
You are obviously aware of it, Stephen. You've watched documentaries about it. I didn't even know that Richard Donner had been replaced, I think, with Lester. And then they obviously went back and rehashed it, used some of his footage and obviously archival footage from Donner's second stint and created that version of the film. For me, director's cuts only became a thing in the last 10 or so years in my memory banks with Snyder. He made them popular. He made them great again, to quote one orange face leader in a totally different conversation. But Stephen, where was your sort of access point with director's cuts? Was it going back to what was it, 82? Would you have been aware of Superman 2 at that point?
Well, Blade Runner, John, I think that was the first one I became aware of, was probably the Blade Runner director's cut. And I think there's been multiple versions since. I only remember the studio release. I've only ever seen the film maybe a couple of times, and that was probably in the mid to late 80s. But yeah, I mean, I became aware of alternate versions of films round about then, and there wasn't, not that I can remember, there wasn't many at the time, but you know, obviously over the last, as you said, the last decade or so, it's became more of a thing, and it's something that it seems to be. How can you put it? You know, when you I'm not saying you give in to the fans. You've got to, because if we were doing that, they would have done the David Ayer cut as well for obviously the Suicide Squad, etc. John, but
we'll get into that.
I think there was enough in terms of the Zack Snyder one is a unique situation. Obviously, he had a lot of personal tragedy and had to step away from the industry for quite some time. And the likes of Josh Whedon came in and did what they thought was the best thing to do. Hindsight's a great thing. Obviously, I think in terms of if Zack Snyder had stayed on, it might have been a different thing. But so in that instance, you can understand the sort of potential, the possibilities, and what's lying in the vault, etc. That's going to get the fans excited, intrigued, and want to see it. And finally, we did get that, I think, through HBO Max. I think it was, John, am I right saying that? I can't remember.
Yeah.
The platform it was released on, but we got the full sort of version, the best version we could from the sort of Snyderverse. But my sort of first one was probably Blade Runner, but the first one I experienced in terms of watching was probably Superman 2, the Donner cut. I was in HMV, I think, back in 2006. You know, those sort of deals that they do in those sort of stores where you can get 3 DVDs for £15, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of them I picked was Downfall, and the other one I picked was Superman the movie, the 1978 original.
There's something like Stephen with that.
And sitting right next to it was Superman 2, the theatrical cut / Donner cut. And I went, what's this? Because I wasn't aware. I always knew Richard Donner did the original film, and I always knew Richard Lester did the second film. I didn't realise the politics that were involved, and I had to get this thing. You know, I had to see this version. There's a great documentary on it online on YouTube, where they sort of do the balancing act, where they show you different alternate versions of, you know, obviously everyone knows the theatrical cut, but then they show you some of the Donner stuff and the politics that were happening in behind, you know, with the Salkinds, who were the producers for Superman, and Gene Hackman.
The fact, Stephen, that Hackman and Brando didn't come back.
Yeah, Brando. They couldn't get Brando back because they'd have to pay him more money.
Yeah.
Margot Kidder wasn't coming back either. So they had to obviously work around that. Richard Lester had to do a lot of sort of piecing together, and the problem that Richard Lester had in that film was that I think the studio laws are to get a directorial title to be a credit. To be the director on the film, they have to do a certain percentage of the film. At that point, I think it was over 60-something% of Donner's stuff. So he had to go back in and finish the film, and also he had to redo some of the scenes that were already done so he could get the directorial credit.
Yeah, was that not a Clint Eastwood thing? Where he was working on a film as an actor, and then the director booted out and he took over, and then they introduced a law after that you had to do a certain amount of directing. I think only one person could be credited as a director. Maybe a different thing I'm thinking about, but I'm sure Eastwood was involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's going back to 1980, so
yeah,
it was a long time ago, John, but a fascinating thing, and I love those kind of things, and I love the circumstances behind it. You know, I know you've posed the question about, are we romanticising the wrong version? I think you can go a bit deeper than that and say, where do you draw the line? And we know who has the final say in these things. More often than not, it's the studio. But is that right? You know, and that's the kind of thing. And it's also another thing. It's a learning thing for people that are not in the industry like ourselves. That, you know, who has that control? Who has the decision making? Because we were speaking before we came on talking about trailers and how they're put together, and you just naturally assume the director has his hand in that, not realising they don't. They probably don't have to, because what you're seeing in a trailer is directors' decisions anyway.
Yeah.
And it's mostly a marketing director that will choose the best sort of moments to promote the film. But
sometimes I wish the director was involved though. Sometimes I wish the director was involved in trailers, because then we wouldn't get some ridiculous choices. Obviously, the Michael Bay movies spring out to mind, where you're essentially getting all the set pieces that are of any importance in the trailers, and there's no point at that stage to even go to the theatre and watch it, because we know that his movies, certainly the later versions that he was putting out, Transformers, were all bluster, all bombastic action and no story, which is why that fucking franchise is dead and buried, and we get Bumblebee and whatnot. We have posed the question, are we romanticising the wrong version? I don't think we are. It depends what version you're romanticising. If you're romanticising the theatrical version and you think that is the gold standard version of the film, then I think you are wrong. You're romanticising the wrong version at that point. Steve, we know this, having been fans of Snyder, and I remain a fan of Snyder. I don't think there's been an awful film from the guy. I mean, you think back throughout his career, and most of those movies I really enjoy. So I'm a big fan of the guy, and obviously the way he was treated with the executive branch of Warner Brothers, the way that they interfered in running times and just meddled in decisions with the movie, and obviously the way he was shuffled out the door with the death of his daughter and whatnot. Awful way to treat the guy, and he had an incredible vision in place that he wanted to see through to the end. But we know through his experiences that, and what he's chose in terms of not even just the DC stuff, but going back to other movies the guy was involved in, that ultimately you can have meddling from the executives, and then that impacts on your creative vision. So the theatrical cut at that point becomes a bastardised version. It no longer is what you intended it to be. So if you have enough sway as a director to then say, well, you've got your way, you've put that into the theatres, now I'm going to get my way and release my cut with a full vision, then ultimately I think that should be the the version that is romanticised, because for good and bad, that is the director's version of the film, and it's his love child. It's his creative sort of baby.
You have to understand as well that, you know, studios want their cake and eat it. They always want that, and we've seen it recently. We covered it on our movie news show with the Joel Schumacher cut for Batman Forever, I think it was. This was, I think, was this before Val Kilmer's passing? I can't remember, John, when we covered it, but it became a thing, and I went, well, who's making that decision? Because I bet it's the same people that made the decision in 1995, you know, to put out the film that we all saw, and we never got to see, obviously, Schumacher's full version of this film, which apparently, you know, is a lot darker than what we saw in the theatres. So it kind of annoys me at times when studios do that, because they make their money on that theatrical release, and then they realise, you know, obviously, you know, sadly, Joel Schumacher's no longer with us, Val Kilmer's no longer with us, and now they want to, I don't want to say milk it, it's a bit, but it's disrespectful, I think, in a certain way. You know, if the director's not get any say in that release, they shouldn't do it. I don't think there should be a Joel Schumacher release, because he's not here to make any decisions on it.
No, it has to be the director, Stephen, that's got his fingerprints on it and making the decision. It can't be the same executive figures, even if it's not the same actual people involved in the process that were involved when the movie was in production, and interfering and deciding this is the cut it goes out because for whatever reason it's too long, it's too dark, we don't like this character, we don't like that choice you've made with the plot, so you need to make changes. Even if it's newer faces who've come in after the fact and want to put out an alternate version, you can't have them making a decision. It has to be the person who brainchilded the idea, be it the director, scriptwriter, whatever. They're the people that have to have full creative control. Ultimately, Stephen, we were talking about other figures. We spoke about Dune, obviously, with Denis Villeneuve, because we were talking about another prominent director's cut, Peter Jackson, The Lord of the Rings, much longer, full experience, less things. I think Tom Bombadil's still omitted, though, in The Fellowship, which is the correct decision. As a Tolkien fan, never understood people getting their knickers in a twist over Tom Bombadil not being in the Lord of the Rings movies. That was unbelievably boring. Even reading it, I just want to skip through. You can't have a guy with a yellow hat and a big round red face singing and dancing around the banks of a river. It's just completely ill-fitting, and what's meant to be it's a different medium. You're watching a film, you can't be sitting there and it's meant to be balls to the wall, rushing to get to Rivendell with this ring to safety, and then we're just going to have a little tangent with this strange magical guy who's dancing about a fucking river. That's no chance. Correct decision. I digress though, Stephen. Obviously, Peter put them out. We were talking about literary adaptations. We spoke about Denis. That's a whole other thing. It's not really on this sort of bullet-pointed thing we're kind of loosely adhering to here. Sometimes it comes down to directors just having enough muscle and enough reputation to be able to see out their vision fully. And with Denis and Dune, that guy obviously has got enough creative muscles, he's got enough reputation as a filmmaker, and the executives respect him enough to do his thing, that they left him alone. He doesn't need a director's cut. So,
I mean, obviously, the studio still has the final say, but you're absolutely right, John. It's all about trust at the end of the day. You know, and if you've got the right studio execs in place that know their stuff and know their directors and know the sort of director and filmmaker and storyteller that Denis Villeneuve is, then you let him do his thing. That's what he's paid to do. He's paid to direct the film and his vision. And you know, he'll have his advisors, he'll have his executives, his own sort of crew, that'll, you know, in terms of lighting and location and stuff like that. But the final say should come down to the director, because that's what they're appointed to do, you know. And the producers are the sort of go-between between the studio execs and the sort of crew, the director and the crew. And that's the way it should be. It's too many times we've seen studios interfere. And as you said, you know, they certainly did it with Zack Snyder in terms of making sure those films weren't over 2 hours long and stuff like that.
Seems to be a DC thing.
That's fine, you know, if the story's contained, but not with comic book films, you know, and comic book lore, where you've got decades and decades of storytelling there, and they're trying to condense these stories into one film at a time, and it doesn't work like that. And that was one of the failings of the DCEU, was that there were too many constraints and they were rushing things too much. They were trying to do quick 2-hour films to catch up with obviously Marvel at the time, and it was just bad decision.
Steve, we maintained that at the time. That was the wrong choice creatively. DC has never been the same as Marvel. Marvel is a more lighter, fluffier experience, and that lends itself to film at times maybe better than what DC has, but what DC has is more darkness and serious, villainous characters, the likes of Lex Luthor, who's quite insidious, and obviously cerebral in the way that he operates. The Joker, he's a maniac. He's breaking the fourth wall. He's almost got self-awareness in the comics so that he's in a comic. But he's again a more cerebral, dark villain. Riddler, more cerebral, dark villain. It's different to Marvel, so they shouldn't have tried to do a sort of identikit of what Marvel had been doing in 2008 and try and repeat that and catch up. They should have been doing things at their own pace, leaving a guy like Snyder, much like they're now doing with James Gunn and Peter Safran. He do his thing, slowly but surely map it out, and then you can make the magic happen and get the sort of benefits 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road. But the way that they were obviously interfering. But Stephen, how much of it is down to DC with Zack? Because I've got a list up here of all the different director's cuts, well, prominent ones anyway, and his name does appear a lot.
Yeah.
Zack, and they're not all DC. So Zack has long had this sort of obsession over redoing his films and putting out the definitive version of a film. And Stephen, it's not something that's just him. I've mentioned James Cameron, Ridley Scott, Peter Jackson. There's so many, even George Lucas to an extent. You could argue they're not director's cuts, but they effectively are director's cuts. The Star Wars special editions, constantly tinkering, never happy. How much of it comes down to studio interference, but sometimes just the directors themselves are just pained that they can't get this perfect version of what they intended, be it a performance or restraints with visual effects, and they just want to keep going back and doing it again and again. If you had this back in like the fucking Renaissance days with prominent painters constantly going back and thinking, you wouldn't have these incredible paintings because they'd be ruining them. So you've got to stop at some point.
What you just said there actually just sort of blends into what I was about to say in terms of a George Lucas quote was that he said, when he was doing it just to justify the special edition, was an artist has never finished their work. They're never finished. At some point they've got to just stop adding and amending. But I think in terms of I suppose, if anything that you create, you've got to make that decision at some point that's it done. That's the definitive version of the best that I can make this thing. George Lucas, to be fair, has always said, he had budget constraints back in 1975 or whenever it was they started doing the Star Wars film, and and studio conflict and all that kind of thing. It was always up against it. And they only got to do certain things. John, see the special editions in terms of where I sat with them. I'm not sure where you sat with them. A lot of good was done with the special editions in terms of the audio and the visuals, cleaning them up. There was nothing wrong with that, but there was some really jarring things in there that should not have been anywhere near those Star Wars films.
Greedo shooting first.
There probably is more good than bad, but the bad things really do stand out.
No, Stephen, in terms of the visuals, and he opened it up, you've seen it with the sort of documentary, I think, or videos that were put out about them. Bestman in particular and The Empire Strikes Back, the way they opened it up, and it was so boxed in and claustrophobic and small in scale, and going back and obviously doing stuff and opening it up, it just transforms the look of the film. It keeps it more in line with what came afterwards. They'd be horribly aged compared to even what Disney, the shite they've been putting out in terms of stories, but visually, they're trying to harken back to the originals, but they're much grander in scale. That's the problem you've got, Stephen. Obviously, we'll tie that into Blade Runner in a moment as well, because obviously Blade Runner has been reworked a million times. I mean, there's a director's cut, but I think there's been a different version every fucking decade since it came out. So it's been worked and worked and worked and worked. There's nothing wrong with a director going back and redoing stuff if they've had limitations at the time, or there's been some other reason like studio interference. So I've got no issues with the likes of Zack Snyder getting back because he had interference. He wasn't able to maybe tell the story he wanted to tell within 2 hours, so he had to sort of kowtow to DC or Warner Brothers and then put his version out, and then people get to see both. Everyone's a winner. But
I get it's down to constraints, John, and if they've got a release date set as well, then I get there's got to be some tough decisions made. I get that, and in terms of obviously schedules and getting that film out, and understand that it's not studios being dickheads. They're business people, and they see an end game, and that's where they want the end game to finish. That's where they want it done. That's when they want post-production complete, and the film starts to promote. I get that. But there is times, John, in terms of the theatrical cuts, the director's cuts, etc., that I've seen over the last 20, 25 years that some have worked, and that some of the re-releases, and some haven't. And I can give you some examples. The Terminator 2 Ultimate Edition one, which came out. Michael Biehn's inclusion in that one, Kyle Reese, was fantastic. It was one of the best things I saw in that version that was not in the theatrical. And then you look at the butterfly effect. Now, I might need help on this one because I always get mixed up because I've seen both endings. I've seen the director's one, I've seen the theatrical one. The one where the baby in the womb self-sacrifices. It's such a heartbreaking moment, John.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the director's cut. I think it might be the director's cut.
Well, that's an example of it being done right. If it is.
Yeah, the other ending was that they just passed each other on the street. I think to an Oasis song. What's it? Stop Crying Your Heart Out. Yeah. Which was a good ending. It was a great, but I always preferred the one with the self-sacrifice. It was tragic, but it was necessary for what was happening in that film. Yeah. And then there's other ones like obviously the inclusion of Christopher Lee in the Return of the King, which it wasn't necessary, but it was, being a Christopher Lee fan, it was great to see him.
Stephen, the whole Lord of the Rings stuff, the extended versions of them, you could make a strong argument that none of them are necessary. As we kind of say, Stephen, those Lord of the Rings movies, I don't give a shit what anyone says. You can bring up artsy stuff from random French directors of trilogies that no one's ever fucking seen. I know there's one in particular, I've never seen it, and I've got no inclinations to ever see it. I don't care, I'm not going for a film degree in film school, so I don't have to watch it. For me, The Lord of the Rings is one of the greatest trilogies ever made. It's as close to cinematic perfection as you're going to get.
Yeah.
And that's the bog standard movies that get put out. I thought Peter Jackson done a brilliant job of making choices in terms of not just him, but also his wife and other people involved. What to leave on the cutting room floor, what to put in the movie. I think in terms of the way it flowed, the way they told the story, developed the characters, never a dull moment. I went and seen, I might have only seen 2 of those movies in the theatres. I don't think I've seen the Two Towers in the theatres. I've definitely seen Fellowship and I've seen Return of the King, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But not a dull moment. I thought you got it fucking perfect in the theatrical versions. Yeah. Obviously, if you're a fan and you've got acting talent like Christopher Lee involved and you've got a limited time because they're getting older to fit them into a movie, and for whatever reason you can't get them in that theatrical version, if you can then bring them back in an extended version, if you can enrich the story for genuine fans, give them more of a good thing, then knock yourself out. That's an example of there's no right or wrong one. It's sort of romanticise. They're both correct.
I think in terms of the inclusion of Christopher Lee in Return of the King, it was more about
finishing
just
the story.
Seeing the presence of the character more than anything. Did it change the story? It didn't change anything at all, John. It didn't change the pacing or anything. I don't actually know Peter Jackson's full reasons. I think it was just a case that the character at that point didn't serve its purpose or anything like that. So, but it was still a good scene to see. The one that didn't work for me, John, we talked about this off camera, was Donnie Darko.
Can I just quickly, before you go into Donnie Darko, as a fan of Tolkien, I actually think Peter Jackson, the way that he dealt with the death of Saruman was better than the way Tolkien dealt with the death of Saruman in the novels. I thought it was such a shit way for that character to go out. He actually made a change, and I think it was a change for the better. To have him go butthurt, a shadow of himself, all the way to the Shire, and then meet his end, a snivelling, pathetic end, where he absolutely treated them with nothing but contempt. He could never understand Gandalf's obsession with these pathetic little people up in the corner of the Middle-earth. They were unimportant. I thought that was fucking genius from Peter.
Yeah.
So that's actually an example of where creative licence is done better than the actual novels. Usually it's the other way about. They bastardise it.
I think in terms of that decision, you could look at it from the perspective of, trust the fans, let them in their heads work out what happened, it doesn't really have to be explained to them, visually, but and if you've read the books anyway, it doesn't really matter. But John, Donnie Darko was the one that kind of stood out to me in terms of its director's cut, which I think came out, I don't know if it was a year later.
I'm talking shit. The books are the ones he goes to the Shire. Sorry, Peter, doesn't matter. You got it right anyway. I've sort of thought I was getting confused there. I had to search it up. He does go to the Shire in the books. He still gets fucking killed by Wormtongue. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes just leaving it out and letting, the story. I mean, it wasn't really that important anyway in terms of where they were taking that story, John. And as you said, books are a different thing to film as well in terms of the medium and how these things translate better. So I think in terms of Peter Jackson, I think you're right. I totally agree. I think it's almost the most perfect trilogy you're going to get. But
Donnie Darko, Stephen, I'll let you finally go on to Donnie without interrupting you.
Donnie was a funny one because it was it was well received here in the UK when it first came out in the early 2000s, and then I think maybe a year or two later, the director's cut came out on DVD. And I remember seeing the theatrical one, and I loved it, obsessed with it. I think it was my introduction to Jake Gyllenhaal's Will, and Maggie. Maggie was in there as well. And it was just a great film. And a big part of it was obviously the storytelling and how it was told, and director trusting the audience to sort of see this through. Also, that from a production point as well, some great tracks in there, sort of captured in the mid-80s. And then you flash forward to the director's cut, where it has visuals in there that are, it's almost like a paint by numbers explanation of what's happening, and what's about to happen. And they changed some of the soundtrack as well, which I was really bummed about. I mean, they still picked some great tracks, but it wasn't what I remembered. And I just thought, why did they do this? Sometimes I do see director's cuts and I go, I don't understand why they've done this. I really can't really, get my head round why they just didn't leave it the way it was. What is this? Is this a vanity thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, that's when it doesn't work. You don't hold the hands of the audience. You've got to trust the audience to understand what you're telling them, and if they don't understand, then they're tough titty. You're too thick to understand. That's on you. That's your problem. At the end of the day, for me, Donnie is one of the greatest. What would you call that? Would you call that a sort of sci-fi time slip, alternate reality? I don't know what genre you'd even pigeonhole that into.
Yeah, quite a few genres in that.
But I mean, it's one of the best in that kind of genre, within a genre, within a genre. And Gyllenhaal was phenomenal. That's an example of a director's cut. I mean, I understand it's a director, it's their choice, but no, it doesn't work for me. And it's an example of, if you're romanticising that, then you're a clown. Steve, obviously there is ones where you've got, like, say, Aliens. I'm looking at Aliens here, and a lot of it was aired on US TV in '89, and it was completely sanitised of gore and all sorts of stuff. So they had to go in and do a special edition.
Right. And
obviously it includes all the stuff that was supposed to be there. That's an example that, to me, doesn't even bear conversation. I mean, obvious why he's went in and done that. The one for me, Stephen, that shocked me the most, and again, it's not really a director's cut, and I wasn't even aware of this, and it's one of my favourite films of all time, The Shining. There's two versions of The Shining. There's an American version, which is significantly longer. It's 25 minutes longer, which is a fucking eternity in a feature-length film. That's unbelievable. That's an eternity. And that version apparently holds the hand of the audience quite a significant bit more than what the European version at 119 minutes does. American version 144, European 119. By all accounts, Kubrick thought European audiences were more switched on and clever and didn't require getting their hands held through plot points, so he omitted a huge amount. I've never seen the American cut, so I don't even know what that looks like. There is a couple of things in there that do sound cool though, that I'd like to see, and I can just go onto YouTube and do it now, where you've got fucking blanking her name. I say it's one of my all-time favourite fucking movies. Jesus Christ, man. Wendy, she near the end, she runs into a sort of party scene in the Overlook, and there's like skeletons with like tinsel and whatnot, or cobwebs. That sounds fucking cool. So that I'd like to see. But that's an example where you're going down a whole different rabbit hole, where the director is making creative choices for completely different audiences, where he thinks one audience is maybe a little bit, I don't want to offend American people here, but maybe a little bit dimmer.
John.
Maybe a little bit dimmer than the rest of the world. So he has to include 25 minutes more footage holding their hands. That is mind-blowing. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Sometimes less is more, specifically in that genre. You know, if you've got to be very careful not to sort of paint it by numbers with thrillers, you know, horrors, because you're borderline, one, you're going to insult your audience, and two, you're giving the game away. You know, and all suspense is lost after that. So I'm quite surprised that I've never seen the American version myself, and I probably will have to go down a rabbit hole and look at those cutscenes from the
including
European
stuff
version.
Like Jack and Danny, he abuses him at some point, like attacks him, and it gives you a visual reference of why the relationship is touchy as it is. Whereas in the actual version I've seen, you don't need that. You can tell just by looking at him and the way they behave around him that he's clearly a little bit unhinged. You have to be to take your family out of a fucking hotel in the middle of nowhere and be snowed in.
You know, perhaps maybe it was Stephen King that saw the European version and he was wondering why there was a lot more in it. I don't know. Maybe that's why he took the huff. But
well, I mean, Doctor Sleep's another one, Stephen, where again, it's more like...
Yeah, the Ewan McGregor one.
Yeah. But it's more like a Lord of the Rings situation where the director's cut, it's enhancing and giving you more. It's sort of enriching the experience by giving you more of the story. So I don't mind that. I don't mind these director's cuts, Stephen, when it's been a creative choice without rehashing from the executives, from the sort of studios to interfere and demand that be a shorter running time for multi-demographic audiences. And then the director can then go in and give you the full experience afterwards. That's, for me, the perfect situation. And it's ultimately why I feel so sorry for David Ayer that he's not been given the opportunity that Snyder got to see his version of the Suicide Squad out in the wild. Because by all accounts, not just him, but Jared Leto get done completely dirty. I think there's about 10 minutes of Leto Joker footage that was left on the cutting room floor, which is fucking wild. And it was one of my biggest criticisms of that movie when it came out. You've made Joker one of the most iconic villainous characters, not just in comic books, but in film now as well, into a romantic subplot for Harley Quinn, who is the romantic subplot for Joker. What the fuck? I know it was Margot Robbie. I understand. She done brilliant as a character, but you've got an Academy Award-winning actor playing an iconic character, and you cut him out of the movie. Why not give us that version?
Yeah, I think we know that. I think we know the reason for that, John. But bearing the time of its release and what was going on in Hollywood at the time and the whole woke thing and all that, John, I think that's probably something to do with it as well. But I've never seen the Leto extended stuff. Obviously, I saw the extended stuff in the Snyder Justice League stuff. It was pretty good, but I've never seen the Suicide Squad stuff. I don't think I've got the energy now. I think since the Suicide Squad was released, I've not went back to watch that original film, the one with Will Smith. I don't think it was a bad film, to be honest with you. It just wasn't great, you know. And I think in terms of coming off the back of Batman v Superman as well, which also had an ultimate cut as well, which I actually didn't mind. I thought it was a better version. Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those periods. I think, the studios were so paralysed by decision making. Everyone was offended by everything at this point, and yeah, it's one of those things that you just got to move on. I don't think David Ayer's losing any sleep over the fact that it's not been released. I think he's moved on pretty quickly from it, but it's a bit unfair that one director gets his release and another one doesn't.
To be fair, Stephen, as we've seen with the Snyder Cut, there was enough meat in the bones for that to be released and be justified.
Oh, yeah.
And it was quite important to the overall sort of universe, whereas the Suicide Squad, not so much. And ultimately, there's only so much you can do with a movie that's got Cara Delevingne, whatever the fuck her name is, Vinge, as the villain. Huntress or Enchantress or something. Terrible, man.
Yeah.
Terrible. Never an actor. And a terrible choice to put her in the movie as the villain. Fucking awful. But Stephen, obviously, we've kind of discussed this. Winners and losers, case studies of films improved. We've kind of did that. We've kind of spoke about films that have been improved. Obviously, the vast majority of these films are improved by a director's cut, because it's ultimately the director who's put this into the world, into the universe. It's their creative vision. And for one reason or another, they've not been able to realise that vision for theatrical versions. And then when they then set about putting out a director's cut, it's because they think there's something been left on the cutting room floor or omitted that deserves to be seen by the audience. So obviously when you're of that mindset and you know what you're fucking doing, if you're pushing hard enough to get that version out, then it's going to be better. 9 times out of 10 they are better. There is instances, as we've kind of discussed. Donnie Darko. Shit.
Shit, yeah.
Don't do that. There is rare cases where these director's cuts are definitely not positive. Stephen, we've kind of posed here, is it a clever marketing ploy? These sort of director's cuts, just deliberately putting out. Have we seen any manipulation of this in recent times? Because I can't really think of any, other than maybe the director. I mean, I still maintain Snyder knew what he was doing. I think he was operating clandestinely in the shadows, whipping up a storm on social media to get that cut out. And that almost became a marketing point. It was from him. It wasn't even from fucking Warner Brothers. I don't think they had any interest in doing it. But he and the fan base twisted their arms enough that they actually were able to change the decision of a major Hollywood studio and get that out. So I suppose in a sense that is clever marketing to keep pushing, because there was guys like Campere at the time, Stephen, saying that it didn't even exist. There was no finished version, that it was all sort of mechanical cuts or some bollocks, I don't know, that it wouldn't even be possible. And then it fucking happened. So, I don't know.
I don't know, John, but whatever it was, it worked, I think, because obviously that version was released. I was going to say the film was released, but it was more of a, I don't know, it was more broken down, wasn't it, for HBO? It wasn't. I mean, I think they eventually put it together as one feature film, but I mean, having watched it, John, I'm glad I watched it. It was a good version, but I think the theatrical release kind of just sort of, it just sickened me. It sounds very dramatic, but I watching that, I was like, what is this? Is this the best that DC can do? In terms of their equivalent to an Avengers film, just some bad decision making. It kind of sickened me to the point where I kind of gave up on the whole universe at that point, because it was just a badly made film, and I knew we weren't getting a Man of Steel 2 at that point. So when we were obviously, when the Zack Snyder cut was finally released, I don't know if I can't remember being that excited about it. It was more of an intrigue, because you're hearing all these things about, this version is the ultimate version, and what came out was a bastardized version of it, and it was Whedon that did that film. I can't remember, but just in terms of that, I think it was very long. Some of the scenes we were already familiar with, but I think in terms of similar to the Batman v Superman Ultimate Cut or whatever it's called, I think it served its purpose. I think in terms of pacing, it was better. In terms of some of the edits as well, it was a lot better. And then obviously some extended stuff with more characters was better as well. So I think it was a worthwhile marketing project. I don't know how much money the studio would have made out of it. Much, I'm not really sure. I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, it's sometimes that these things work, John, and sometimes they don't. But I think it all comes down to that. Do we really need multiple versions of films coming out? That are going to kind of very similar to the Butterfly Effect one, where it kind of muddies the water over time with your mind. Two versions start to blend into one.
Yeah. No, Stephen, I agree. I'm more blown away by. I was on Rotten Tomatoes, seeing what the Snyder Cut how it performed in terms of audience and critics. It actually performed pretty well. I'd imagine far above the Whedon version. But then I just so happened to glance down and fucking hell, I know it's not pertinent to what we're discussing just now, but Fantastic Four is getting eviscerated, man. 9% from the critics, 18% from the audience. Wow. A profound mess. It's not fun, it's not exciting.
There's your news for Monday night.
Yeah, yes, man, we need to talk about that, absolutely. 100%. And just comparing that to, obviously, Superman, which I thought was fucking brilliant. So, we're seeing a reverse in fortunes for Marvel and DC now. Tough titty, they had it their own way for over a decade, I'm not complaining. No, I mean, Stephen, ultimately, I think we'll end it on, obviously, the fandom itself. And you talked about, obviously, marketing ploys, nifty little things from Snyder and the fans to try and push for this. But obviously, there is an elephant in the room with that side of things, which is the toxic part of social media and the fan base, even now, still attacking the likes of James Gunn because they've moved on from certain characters and Henry Cavill's iteration of Superman. And obviously, the inherent dangers enabling people like that by backing down to them and allowing cuts. Obviously, in our case, and in most people's cases, I think they enjoyed the Snyder version, but it's not fucking perfect by any means. Better than the Whedon version, but you have to walk a very tight line. It's almost like a tightrope between the Twin Towers, like that mental French fucking guy from the 70s. That's the line you have to walk as a studio executive when you're giving in to maybe directors and their versions of films, if it even is down to them. If the director hasn't got a say in it himself, I don't know how it works, I'm not a director. But it's a tough one, Stephen. Do you keep enabling fans to keep demanding? Ultimately, the fans should have some sort of influence. And we've seen that for the good as well with the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, where they immediately revolted against that god-awful, horrendous, human-teethed hedgehog thing that wasn't Sonic. The fan base spoke, the director spoke and listened, and we got what we got, which was far superior. So you've got to kind of walk that line.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of the other way. I don't think fans should have any say in the way a film's made. I don't think they should. I think the studio should be strong enough. I think they should be focused enough. I think they should be confident enough to put out the best version of a film that they know the fans will like. And in that instance, they didn't. Again, obviously difficult circumstances with Zack Snyder and his personal tragedy, but what they did put out was a really poor version of that film. And the other thing you've got to be careful is that I think it gives licensing and entitlement to fans if you keep, we'll do that. The Sonic thing I got because I was one of them. I was like, that's fucking horrendous, get that to fuck. So that's terrible. But in terms of the Snyder Cut, I think Zack had a lot to do with obviously getting his own way, I would say, in terms of the release of that and putting the pressure on the studios. But once you do that, it does open a can of worms, for the fans to demand the right, for another Man of Steel 2. It's coming in 2026, 14 years after the first one. Henry Cavill's hairline's further back.
We were talking about that, weren't we?
I love Henry and I love Zack, but we need to move on.
No, but Henry, I mean, that's one thing. They definitely done him dirty. If Chris Evans, who's got a phenomenal head of hair, by the way, unbelievable head of hair, could get a fucking wig for, I think, what was it, Age of Ultron? Or was it, no, it was Infinity War. if you're putting a wig on him to thicken his hair up, for fuck's sake, you've got to do it for Superman. You've got to. I'm not saying Henry's balding, because I know a bit about balding. There's balding. Henry, not balding, far better hairline than me. But my God, man, it's not Superman hairline. It's not. Superman's an alien, guys. Perfect. He's got an unbelievable hairline. It's thick. David Corden's fit. That's a Superman hairline. Henry Cavill, not a Superman hairline. Not his fault. They could have put a wig on him. If it was good enough for the Shat 60 years ago, it's good enough for Henry in this day and age. But no, Stephen, I agree with you. Ultimately, they have to move on. You can't keep kowtowing to fucking fans. You can't. You'll never be out the bit. And films are already costing $300-400 million now, and they can't make a profit. So if you keep saying, well, that's not good enough because this guy doesn't like it, so we have to make a change. It goes back to what I said previously. Ultimately, it should be a creative decision from the director. It shouldn't cost more money either. Also with Snyder, that was different because tragic circumstances, understand, there was a swell of support. They bowed down to it. That was a one and done. Ultimately, it shouldn't cost any more money. It should be stuff that's there, it's produced. For whatever reason, it's not included in the theatrical version. If it doesn't cost any more money and it's allowing the director to see his vision out, fucking knock yourself out, make it happen. And in some instances, Stephen, they're actually taking stuff out. So it's not even longer. They don't always have to be longer. It's just an alternate version. They maybe rejig things, they do something with editing. There's just little changes creatively. No issues with that. But you can't allow the fans to get away. Stephen, we're going to end it with this little question. Well, I'll ask you, and then I'll give my opinion. If
you shot first,
yes,
Han or Greedo?
Well, I mean, two. I mean, obviously, it was Han. Come on. It was definitely Han. I mean, that's a whole other thing, by the way, Stephen. I mean, that's a whole other conversation we've not even touched upon. That released relatively recently, the original version of Star Wars could be the original fucking, film? I think they discovered it in BFI, British Film Institute. It could be the very original version. People seen it, they didn't like it. They weren't having it. Obviously, there was a degree of intrigue because it's a version I've not seen. But ultimately, they came out probably siding with George that was the correct decision because it just felt dated. Audio-wise, video-wise, it just felt dated. So ultimately...
That's the wrong audience then, because the way I look at it is you've got to get in with that mindset, of preservation and the time it was made, because I don't think, it's like putting a teenager down in front of Charlton Heston's Planet of the Apes, they would just sit and fucking laugh at it, And it's a classic, John. I'm not down in the film, I love the film. But you've got to have the right audience for it, an appreciation that will understand the constraints of technology and finances at the time. I've got a version of it from 2004, I think, John, on DVD, and I've watched it, and it's pretty basic stuff, some of the stuff, but I've got an appreciation. That was the one that I grew up with before, obviously, 1997. That's the one I remember, and it was the one that had me in awe. When I watched it.
And I must have seen that version as well. Because I was aware of Star Wars in the mid-90s.
Yeah, you would have, John.
So I must have seen that version. Did Han shoot first in that version?
Well, only Han shot. There was no shot first. It was only Han.
Yeah.
It was cold blood. It was cold, just killing
sorry,
cold blood.
did Greedo shoot first in that one?
Greedo didn't. I don't think Greedo had a chance to even pull the trigger. Han just shot him under the table.
Fucking ridiculous, isn't it? See, that's the version I remember. I don't recall Greedo shooting first. I know, always fucking blew him away.
He never shot.
Which is ridiculous. Absolute nonsense.
That's when people say who shot first. Nobody shot first. Fucking Han shot. That was it. Done.
And that was the correct decision. Because George...
Greedo's on the table smoking.
George also didn't understand. I mean, he should, because he's a great director. Well, yeah, good director. I don't think great maybe pushing it. He had one proper great movie. I didn't mind American Graffiti, and I'm not having that sort of fucking avant-garde bollocks. I'm not got time to watch it. Again, I ain't going to film school. I don't need to watch this fucking shit, sniff farts and say it's good. I ain't watching that. So ultimately, Star Wars 1977 for me is the one great movie he made. I don't think he was involved in the director's seat in the other two. Was he? Was he involved in Return of the Jedi? That would explain a lot.
Yeah, it's a funny one, John, because I think technically, I think he wanted Spielberg, but he got Richard Marquand, the Welsh director, because he wasn't part of the union.
Yeah.
He had to get somebody that wasn't part of the film union at the time, and he went with him. But I think Richard Marquand had never done anything to that kind of scale, so George Lucas was kind of directing, if you know what I mean.
Fucking Ewoks.
Yeah.
Teddy bears defeating the Empire. Georgie. I digress, man. The whole hand thing's a one mistake that he made. I actually do prefer the special editions in the end. They open it up, they make it more modern.
Yeah.
But I mean, Han's meant to be a scoundrel. He's meant to be a smuggler. He's a scumbag.
Yeah.
And then he grows as a person.
I get why he did it. You know, you look back at 1997 when they were released, he would have been penning The Phantom Menace at this point. And preparing for the prequel trilogy with all the new technology, thanks to Jurassic Park.
Jurassic
He
Park.
must have known if this is going to be a continuation from 1, 2, 3, and then on to 4, 5, and 6. He has to make those changes to bring it up to speed, to bring it up to a modern sort of standard. But he went too far sometimes in certain areas.
He certainly did. Yes, he did.
That Jabba thing does my head in. I hate that.
Yeah, what is it? Something about human being. You're a wonderful human being. He's a fucking slug. Are you blind?
I'm a bogey.
Are you blind? Are you blind, Han? I understand it was a human being originally. He's a fucking slug.
He must have been blind because he went round the back of him and stood him. You know, so.
Yeah.
But why would you do that?
That's an example. I mean, it just makes no fucking sense. But that's George for you. I love George, but he's not impervious. The guy made some howlers. He sold us some lemons. Jar Jar Binks. Listen, I was a target demographic.
Did you ever see that clip?
Stephen, I can't.
He's the key.
Yeah, the Stephen.
He doesn't work, the whole thing falls down.
Well, I mean, fuck, it didn't work, and the whole thing didn't fall down. Not because of him. Well, I mean, it technically did fall down because it wasn't a patch. Nah, listen, I'm being harsh. Stephen, I loved Jar Jar when I was younger. Let's not kid ourselves here. I won and this is going to be the most Americanised, pathetic pish that's going to come out my mouth, a candy dispenser. A Jar Jar Binks candy dispenser. I won it in a competition and had to wait about 6 months, and then I finally got it. A little Jar Jar Binks head in the tongue kind of spat things out. So I love Jar Jar. Let's not kid ourselves here. Let's not rewrite history and kid on that I hated it, because I didn't. And I didn't even hate the prequels at that time. I still don't hate them now. Is that?
I had a different experience to you then. I remember coming out of the Phantom
I was
Menace
younger though, Stephen. I was fucking 10 when it came out. I think it was 99, wasn't it? I was 10.
Yeah, I mean, I was 23. What was I, 23 at the time when it came out?
Yeah, that'd been, yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is that?
It was designed for me. To be fair,
Yeah, exactly.
He designed it for me. Even I wasn't having aspects. So fish eats bigger fish eats smaller fish.
There's always
Fish
a bigger
eats fish. I don't know. I've lost the fucking plot. That's what George should have done in the storyboarding and not put that in. Stephen, final question. We've spoke about the Snyder Cut. That's a sort of poster boy for director's cuts in the 21st century, the last 10, 15 years. That's the one that said everyone's mind going. Do you think if that version, and it was never going to go into theatres because it was 4 hours fucking long, it's not Das Boot, it's not 1985, it's not when it happened, I don't know when Das Boot came out. It wasn't even Das Boot I'm thinking about, it's the other fucking one that's about 20 hours long, Submarine one. Do you think if that came out, he got to see his creative vision out? Well, obviously we wouldn't have had a fucking director's cut, but do you think people would have viewed it differently at the time? Do you think people, it would have been as celebrated as it ultimately is now, with like 90% audience approval on Rotten Tomatoes, mid 70% by critics? Because ultimately I don't view it as a high 90% movie. Even now I don't.
I don't think it's
romanticised pish.
Anyway, the problem with that film, John, the Snyder Cut, is it's in comparison to the theatrical cut. So anything that comes after the theatrical cut is going to look kind of a million times better.
Yeah.
So I don't know, John. We'll never know how it would have done, but in terms of preference, yes, it is a better film. But that's only because we're comparing it to what came out, and it's one of those ones. Just got to take what you can get, I suppose. But it probably, maybe, I don't know. It depends. A lot hinges on performance in terms of director and the studio. If it performs and makes money, the studio release the purse strings for the next film. Give the director a wee bit more sort of leeway and that kind of thing. That's the way it works. But if the fact that the Justice League, the theatrical one, didn't work, that's when the panic set in with the studio. That's when they went, wait a minute, we've got to downsize here. We can't do a Man of Steel 2 just now. Let's do Aquaman and Wonder Woman. Let's move away from this just now.
Let's put Gal Gadot in the main acting position in a film.
Yeah.
Fantastic decision. Well done, Patty.
I had moments, John. Aquaman was good. Shazam was good. I liked Shazam.
I'm never going to have Gal as an actor, though. She's just not an actor. No one would be having her if she looked like... I'm trying to think of an example. That weird-looking fucking actor that's in The Last of Us. Got the enormous head with a tiny little face. If Gal looked like her, I'm sorry, she ain't got no career. Gal's got a career because she's good looking. Let's not kid ourselves here. And Chris Pine fucking saved her career. He saved her career. Stive in those movies. I mean, it was that bad they brought him fucking back. He fucking died. He died and they brought him back. What? So no, that was, again, there's a lot of issues with director's cuts, pros and cons, but ultimately DC and Warner Brothers over the last 25 years.
What happened to Patty Jenkins?
Wonder Woman 2.
Yeah, but what happened to her after that? She was maybe doing Star Wars. Just I've not heard of her since.
That's Stephen. That's a whole other thing. As soon as you sign up for a Star Wars project, your career's finished. Let's be honest, Taika Waititi was the poster boy. He was the indie fucking hero. He was an Academy Award winner for obviously an adaptation, a screenplay. He signs up for that Star Wars movie and his whole career's just... I mean, I'm not saying he's done as a director or a writer. I still love the guy, but he's fucking hell, man. He's not like he was 6-7 years ago. Star Wars is a poison chalice. It's like getting into the... what the fuck was it called? The indie movie. Where he goes into the cave at the end with the knight and he's trying to find the fucking Jesus thing. Cup. The Holy Grail.
The Last Crusade.
Is that The Last Crusade?
See, when you said the indie movie, I thought you meant independent film.
Oh, Indiana Jones. When they're trying to pick, he's trying to pick the right cup. You pick the wrong cup, you melt into fucking nothingness. Ultimately, that is how poisoned a chalice Star Wars is. And it's why I worry tremendously for Ryan Gosling and what's going to happen to his career signing up for that Star Wars movie. Get out, Ryan. Run, mate. Run just now. It's like the Superman curse, but instead it's your career. Fuck Superman curse. Hope David's all right. Oh, God, I know. That's a whole other conversation, by the way. There's stuff kind of about just now about a certain actor involved with Fantastic Four, and it's just nonsense to me. Absolute nonsense. But we'll get into that, I'm sure, at some point. That's not for this podcast. I'm done, Stephen. I don't know if you've got anything else to say. What's your thoughts on director's cuts? Do you think we're heavily romanticising the director's vision, or do you think it's the theatrical vision? Which version is the correct version? That's the best word I can come up with just now. Which one? Which one is the definitive? Is it the director? Is it the theatrical release, nuts and bolts version that goes out to the Plevingtons? Share your thoughts down below about director's cuts, good and bad. Should they be allowed to happen? Should the director have creative say over it? I don't know, anything you want to say, share it down below in the comments section. Like the video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to get notifications on YouTube. See future content on this. Follow button, notifications button over on Twitch as well. See us live over there doing our thing on a completely different platform. All that's left to be said though is thank you for watching us, and until next time.